one of the problems with being a human is we're biased. We're scared of change. That time you are in the completely autonomous car for the first time, it's going to be a bit, like, uncomfortable.
Oh, there's cars coming! Oh, there's cars! Ah! Bill, just put me back for me control it. Oh,
But you know,
Jesus.
in a
I
couple
could
of weeks,
never-
it's just going to be another way for her to go and play bridge with her friends. So we're talking quite a lot about tech disrupting traditional companies, creating new markets. I know what it feels like from the other side. I've been disrupted. I wrote a book. Penguin asked me to go and record the audiobook version, so I spent 3 days in a windowless studio in West London getting a sore throat, but I did it, and then I realized there was an AI startup that could have done it in 10 minutes.
Imagine turning your book into an audiobook in just 10 minutes. Now you can using audiobook.ai for 10 times less than paying a voice talent. All you have to do is upload your book to audiobook.ai, select a voice from over 30 natural-sounding voices,
and of course, this
and in
is not
10
a
minutes
human,
you
this
can
is a
download your
synthetic
audiobook.
voice.
And the
So
voices sound just
we're at
like
that
me.
moment
Because
where
guess what? I'm a
tech is
synthetic
moving
voice on
so fast,
audiobook.ai.
it
Try
can make
now
us feel
for free.
like it's out of control.
This morning, this video going viral, showing a self-driving car being pulled over by police in San Francisco.
This is crazy.
The car was pulled over because it was driving at night without headlights on. An officer gets out of his car to speak to the driver, only to discover
Ain't nobody in it.
and then the car speeds away from the officers, passing through an intersection.
Because the AI knows it's safer the other side of the red light. So
Before pulling over
just
again.
as I'm getting used to what I thought was the future, you know, stuff like the metaverse was nonsense. Zuckerberg had bet on the wrong horse. I'm having to constantly revise my thinking because improvements in tech get better and better. A couple of weeks ago, we learned that the metaverse actually could be quite useful. Zuck gave an interview to Lex Friedman, a podcaster, in the metaverse. But now, wearing the headphones, even if you're hundreds of miles away, creates this sense that you're actually present.
I'm already forgetting that you're not real. Like, this really, so it's,
Well, I am
it's novel.
This is just an avatar
That's-
version of me.
That's a
but
deep
here-
philosophical question, yes.
So it makes
but here's
it kind of
something- so I
dangerous
put
to
this on
dismiss a
this morning,
technology
and I was like, all right,
when it keeps
like,
improving
it's
on
like,
that
okay, so this, my hair is a
exponential
little shorter in
curve.
this than my physical
And
hair is right now. I probably
all
need
our
to get a haircut.
assumptions about how
and,
we
like,
interact with
and
the
I actually
network,
did happen
you
to
know,
shave
forget
this
the
morning,
mouse,
but if
forget
I
the
hadn't,
touch screen.
You know, I could still have this
Last
photorealistic
week,
avatar that is
A very
that is more
well-funded
cleanly
group of
shaven,
former
right, even
Apple
if I'm,
people thought
a
it
few
might be
days
the
in.
smart AI pin. This is a company called Humane that is experimenting. It might not make it, but there's a lot of creative experimentation. You know, does projecting onto your hand maybe create the next generation of interfaces? But there's only one theme that everybody's talking about at the moment. This has been a crazy year for one technology. I'm not going to give too much away, but the Google boss, Sundar Pichai, gave a very long presentation to the Google Developers Conference in May. I'm not going to make you sit through the whole hour. Here's 14 seconds. See if you can work out his subtle message.
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI is AI, AI. It uses AI to bring AI.
Did you spot it? So I'm really quite old, and I remember 1994 when I was an editor at The Guardian, and I went into a cyber cafe, because that was the only place you could get online in central London. And I played with this, which was the first proper web browser. It's called Mosaic, and the next year it became Netscape. And it was terrible. It was super slow. You had to wait for it to dial up. It was just text. There were no images. This was the internet. This was Yahoo's homepage then. It was hand-edited, and there were hardly any websites there. But I had a sense then that yeah, we'll solve the bandwidth, we'll allow images, at some stage we'll even have moving images. What's this going to do? It's going to mean, as a journalist, I can get any information from anywhere in the world. If I'm wanting to buy something, I could transact. What about entertainment? And I kind of knew, for me, that was the Netscape moment, that we were just at the very start. And it wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was, over time, going to create massive opportunities for disrupting all sorts of industries. And then I got the good fortune to set up, run a magazine that tries to understand the future from the people building it, not just tech and science, design, architecture, culture. And I was trying all the time to work out what was next. And there was one hack I realized, which comes down to this picture from 1956 of 5 megs of storage being uploaded to the cloud, which is now just one picture on your iPhone. And I think what I learned is follow the exponential curves. That Moore's law idea that stuff seems expensive, seems scarce, but over time, the doubling and doubling, the halving and halving, things will come down to pretty much free. Look out for those exponential curves. The steepest exponential curve I've ever seen, and I collect these things, is the ability of the machine to perform cognitive tasks as well as humans. And if you look at, the yellow curve, image recognition in the last decade, we've gone crazy. We can generate code now using a generative AI. So it started slowly, recognizing handwriting, but every area where the machine can think, we're heading upwards on that inflection. And there was something very wise that Kevin Kelly, the first editor of US Wired, wrote 9 years ago. So he'd been there at the beginning of the internet, the World Wide Web, the ability to register domains. Initially, it didn't cost any money. In 1994, he and a couple of colleagues at Wired registered a few domains that were just available, mcdonalds.com. And they called McDonald's and said, hey, we've got this website, we'll give it to you. And McDonald's said, well, why would we want it? No thanks. They couldn't see ahead. They couldn't imagine a scenario where business might depend on digital ordering, digital marketing, digital customer discovery. And 9 years ago, he wrote a little essay called You Are Not Too Late. It was 2014, and his premise was, we think everything significant on the internet has already been invented. Transaction, entertainment, commerce. But he said, actually, we're going to look back in 2044 and realize there were some extraordinary opportunities, some extraordinary trillion-dollar companies built after 2014, because we were just starting to put sensors out into the wild. We were just starting to calculate data at scale. And if you think about where we are today, we're just at the beginning. We haven't put intelligence into almost everything, but the tools are there, and the access point is coming down to a zero price point. And if you think about every exponential technology, from quantum computing to the potential for new sources of energy like nuclear fusion, to the way we're able to create new materials at scale, we're just at the beginning. So I'm going to dedicate this to Kevin and to remind us all, you are not too late. Because I think the last decade has been connecting everything to the net. But now it's putting intelligence into everything. And we haven't really started thinking about what that means. But when performance keeps doubling and doubling, and price keeps halving and halving, it really is limited only by our creative entrepreneurial imagination how we can go and disrupt. So think about what's happening in robotics. It's no longer just the car factory. It's now consumer robotics in all sorts of settings. This is how your hotel will soon be cleaned. A tech invented for one purpose becomes a commodity, is used for all sorts of other things. The robot dog wasn't invented to enforce lockdown in Shanghai during the pandemic, but it's out there. Anybody can use it. Drones are not simply war weapons, the ability to take better photos. This is a company called Tevel that's using drones with computer vision that recognizes which apples are ripe, and then it can pick them. You know, it's already happening on the roads. This is in China. The tech is everywhere, but regulatory regimes create different opportunities for entrepreneurs. And this is where it's going next. You know, we are about to get the flying car. There's a company called Volocopter that's got a contract to take people in vertical takeoff electric jets in the Paris Olympics next year. So things go mainstream. But what everybody's been talking about clearly over the last few months is this doubling and doubling of generative AI and what it's able to do. And what it's able to do is quite crazy. If you've been playing with some of these tools, like Runway, like Midjourney, inventing your own movie without having actors there. This is what Runway enables. And this is in everybody's hands now. This is commodified. If you are a Hollywood studio, if you are an advertising agency spending hundreds of thousands of euros on a 30-second shoot, this changes the rules. You need to keep up. It's an opportunity for startups. And look how quickly, because of those curves, we've got here. Early 2021, this company, which was a non-profit then, called OpenAI, created the ability with DALL-E for you to type in a text prompt in a box. And it was fun, but it wasn't life-changing. You know, Runway started about 18 months ago with the ability to customize an image. It had a big database of video. It's predictive in its algorithm, but it's pretty compelling. But we've jumped so far ahead now that these tools are in everybody's hands.
This video is generated by AI. The AI avatar is generated by Midjourney. Script is generated by ChatGPT. Text to audio is done by 11 Labs. And finally, image to video conversion is done by DID AI. Do you want to create video like this?
If
Let
you
me
are
show you the process step
a
by
law
step.
firm,
Go to
if you're a
DID.com,
manufacturing company, if
click
you're a
on
media
free
company
trial.
and you're not playing with this
Create your
tech,
free
you're going to
account.
get left behind.
Click
It's not
on
perfect
Create
yet.
Video.
Sometimes typing in a
You have
text
to
prompt
select your
doesn't
AI
deliver
avatar.
the
There are
results you're
many
hoping for.
options
Typing in
Or you can create
salmon
your own
swimming
AI
upstream may get you something like this, but we're on the way. And it's indistinguishable from magic because it's an advanced technology that's increasingly working. What about a tech that you can just speak to? There's an app called Replit that will make an app for you. These people wanted a workout app. They talk to Replit. In seconds, it does the coding. And already this year, we've had a bunch of products hit the market that generate, edit TikToks, music, code. So we worry quite a lot
Goldman Sachs
about what it
says
means
that
for us.
300 million full-time jobs around the world could be affected by artificial intelligence. In a report Sunday, their economists predicted 18% of work globally could be computerized.
Although at the same time, Goldman Sachs is getting rid of its coders because it's using AI. We've been a bit scared about AI taking our jobs. It seems the only job that's gone so far is the guy running the AI, but maybe he'll get it back, who knows. So there are social political, economic consequences of all this. We do need to think about those that will get left behind. You know, what's the role of the regulator? What's the role of the state? How do we stop income disparity growing? But it's not going to slow down. And it's not just going to be about AI. It's going to be about what happens when AI is enhanced by quantum computing. What happens when there's a few companies controlling access to all this data processing? What happens when we access the network in all sorts of new ways? So the neural interface is already here, the brain-computer interface. One of Elon's projects, called Neuralink, this monkey has a brain implant that's reading electrical signals in the brain. The monkey is playing Pong, but not using hands. This tech is out there. It's got other uses at the same time. This gentleman in a University of San Francisco study can't speak, can't move his arms, but it reads the words he's trying to say. I met this gentleman, Nathan Copeland. He had a car accident and became paralyzed. There's an American company called BlackRock Neuro that's put an implant that reads his thoughts so he can play games. He can do art on the screen. So this is a crazy sci-fi idea that's just becoming an everyday technology over the next X years. And I'm not saying we'll all be wearing brain implants, but it would be foolish to assume that the way we will access entertainment is by touching a little glass screen. Maybe we'll be wearing some kind of device because we're getting better at reading those signals. So if you're a startup, if you're supporting startups, if you're an incumbent trying to stay alive, you've got to look for the next curves. And they're everywhere. This is a logarithmic scale, the falling cost of sequencing DNA, the green falling much more steeply than the straight line of Moore's law. What was $100 million at the beginning of the century to sequence a person is now $10, $20. It changes healthcare fundamentally. You can sequence the tumor as well as the patient. Another logarithmic scale, the falling cost of solar energy. At the beginning, you needed heavy government subsidies. Now, the market takes over. Linked to that is one of our biggest economic opportunities, I think, of our lifetime. The transition to low carbon. This is the amount of money going into climate tech. You know, a nice exponential curve. It forces every organization in every sector to transform. So every time you see an exponential curve, it's not about here, it's about being prepared for here. This, in the orange, is the total value of cryptocurrencies in circulation. The blue line is the total value of US dollars in circulation. In 2021, crypto overtook dollars. If you're a central bank, if you're a government, if you're an investor, you can ignore it for a while, but it's dangerous to ignore it here because that doubling and doubling at some stage heads towards vertical. It's like that Hemingway line in The Sun Also Rises. Two guys in a bar. One says he's just gone bankrupt. The other says, "How did you go bankrupt?" He says, 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. That's what's happening in every form of tech. So whenever you see an exponential curve, massive opportunities. This one is the total number of space launches over the last few years. Look what's happened. Reusable rockets, low-cost launches. It now doesn't cost millions to launch a satellite. It costs a few thousand. Changes the nature of internet access because you can have constellations of satellites. You can now perform experiments, scientific experiments in space in zero gravity at low cost. It's going to change all sorts of material science, drug discovery. Although you do want to be on a SpaceX offsite when they're using their reusable rockets. If your team offsite doesn't have cheering like this, you've got to work harder. So, everywhere we look, there are tech opportunities. This is a McKinsey slide, but it doesn't teach you anything you don't know. The biology revolution, the nanomaterials revolution. Software, security software, programming. And yet we're humans. The AI hasn't fundamentally changed some of the difficult aspects of being human, which is we're uncomfortable with rapid change. We're also in organizations, typically, which are rewarding continuity. If you made money a certain way the last quarter, the quarter before that, it's really hard to say, screw that, we're going to do something radically different. We're going to disrupt ourselves. It's easy to keep on doing the old way for a bit, but eventually gravity will catch up, which is what kind of obsessed me about proper innovation, because I got to talk at a lot of corporate innovation offsites, and they had their head of innovation and their startups in their incubator. And you'd say, how has this changed the culture? How has this changed how you operate? And very, very little ever changed. It was more signaling change. But now there's an urgency. I'm, in particular, thinking about the planetary urgency that's affecting, because the regulators, especially in Europe, are pushing for change. Every single company having to be carbon accountable, having to come up with new strategies. You are not too late in reinventing any business as a carbon accountable business.
We're still putting 162 million tons into it every single day, and the accumulated amount is now trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the Earth. That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs.
And I think what's really interesting about this room is the Netherlands has some superpowers in addressing this issue. The Netherlands has special knowledge and experience in rethinking agriculture, in understanding, how to get that balance between rising sea and land, in regenerative energy. It's an unfair advantage you have. Use it. This is the moment. One of the things I'm doing now is bringing people together in climate tech to try and create connections. I've created a kind of not-for-profit community called Voyagers. We do dinners. We had a dinner here last night with some entrepreneurs, trips. And it's really interesting what people are working on in the community. There's no limit to the ambition. So just inside our climate tech network, it's essentially peer support, people helping each other. There's a bunch of people working on nuclear fusion. Super ambitious for startups. They might need to raise a couple of billion, but they're doing it. They're working on carbon negative building materials. They're working on zero emission hydrogen electric aviation. They're working on packaging material made from seaweed that you can then eat. We invested in a couple of local companies. One, a guy who hates agriculture, he created a company called Farmless to turn air into protein for food. There's another one called EV Bio that's using precision fermentation to create new materials. There's a lot of great research here. It's just thinking boldly about it. And every problem is an opportunity. So RFID tags that you see in every item of clothing in Uniqlo, they're not recyclable. They have plastic and metal embedded. And then I met this company called CoPrint that creates a copper nano ink that allows you to print conductive labels so you don't need QR codes. It's like creativity with the science. And I think what's really exciting at the moment is there is a move of talent going from conventional sectors into solving these climate issues. They're the climate quitters. There are people leaving McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and Google to try and solve a real problem. And I think where you can add profit to purpose, you create a really quite exciting opportunity for which you are not too late. So this is a writer called George Seraphim who wrote an interesting book about it. And he's a business school professor. He wants businesses to make money, but he's noticed that you get highly motivated teams if you're working on something with a greater purpose than making money. And also, it can be fun to, create a shoe company with a new kind of business model. Buy one, give one to a good cause. You attract customers' loyalty. Or if you're an energy company and you know you need to reinvent yourself, so you decide to become the best in your field at investing in alternatives, you can be dominant. Or if you're a big sausage meat company, you can think, what is our superpower? We know how to manufacture, we know how to distribute, we know food, but the market is going in a different direction. What if we become super dominant, reinvent our systems, our assumptions in non-meat food? And just think, every sector is not just being digitized, it's having intelligence added, but also it's attracting talent that is helping think in new ways. The planet itself, there's a bunch of new kinds of companies creating data, measuring biodiversity, quantifying sustainability in new ways. There are huge markets being created here. Think about where we are with old school education, which was great for the Industrial Revolution, passing information passively to the student. But what happens when you can personalize the education for each of the 30 students in the room, because you know through smart data feedback what they're good at, what they're not so good at? There's all sorts of companies in India, in China, that are doing this in a personalized way. What's happening in healthcare? We're still at the very beginning. We're not tracking very much of our data. Some of you may be wearing an Oura ring or a continuous glucose monitor to monitor your body's effect of various foods, but this is just the beginning. We've now got lots of low-cost regulated products, the Butterfly ultrasound reader that you can plug into your phone, clinical-grade ultrasound, so good that the chief medical officer was playing with it and discovered something he didn't want to discover.
Rather personal story, but the Butterfly ultrasound device that we use today, I diagnosed my own tumor with it. I felt something funny in my neck, connected the probe to my phone, did an ultrasound, and there it was.
So we're just at the beginning. What's happening in connecting us to what we want?
Once the light turns green, I will turn around.
So the world is going autonomous. The roads already have these trucks that are safer than humans. The humans are the ones in the way because they say, we're not convinced that these are fit to be regulated yet, but they're there. One thing I learned whilst writing my book, which took me to about 20 countries, looking, because I didn't want to be cynical, looking for positive instances of existing incumbent organizations actually transforming themselves, creating future-facing business models using tech, which essentially is what innovation is. There are some hacks. There are some hacks which will work not just for the big incumbents, but for the small teams building. And I'll share a few things because nobody reads books. I am happy to accept that. So in about 4 minutes, I'm going to tell you everything you would have learned whilst reading the book. And some little heuristics, some little hacks. And one of the hacks, this is the most incumbent organization you've ever seen. This is like the world's biggest office building in Washington, D.C., with 3 million people working for the US Department of Defense. Massive bureaucracy. They knew that they weren't going to move fast enough. They knew that ISIS was thinking like a startup. The US comes up with a procurement project. It comes in years overdue, billions over budget, and is not fit for purpose because the enemy, ISIS, can take a DJI drone, put a grenade on it, send it over the line. It's a startup. It can break the rules. Their solution, we have to hire some pirates. We have to have some people inside the organization with permission to just build, with permission not to follow the rules, with permission to solve a problem as best they can. So the Department of Defense hired a guy from startups who swears all the time, hates authority, wears hoodies that say things like hack the Pentagon. He was jailed at 16 at school for planting a fake bomb because he didn't like school. His name's Chris Lynch, from startups, not from military. And they said, we need to move faster. We need some of that startup energy. Build a team of 20 or 30 people from the world of coding, from the world of interaction design who can just build. They did the first ever bug bounty contest in American government. They were told it was illegal. You can't encourage friendly hackers to penetrate Department of Defense websites. They found a loophole. They did it. Vulnerabilities were found within minutes. It's now government policy across US government departments. They went to the front line in Iraq, where ISIS was using drones to drop grenades. They coded with the local soldiers a radio signal jammer that took the drones out of the sky that saved lives. So they would have got killed by the culture, but he had a letter in his pocket from the Secretary of Defense saying, these people are on a mission, get out of their way. Every time they were blocked, that was protecting them. So you need, inside your organization, the ability of a small team just to move. Their official title in that department was Defense Digital Service, but they called themselves the Rebel Alliance. It's even on their door in the Pentagon because they were like that Star Wars counterculture. I think you also need to experiment, but go back to why you exist. So I went to Finland, where the biggest consumer retail bank, called Oppa, was being disrupted by startups. Foreign currency transactions, transfer-wise, was doing better. Insurance, lots of startups were doing better. A third of their revenue was from lending money for people to buy cars. What if we don't buy cars in the future, we just access the autonomous network of electric cars? And they realized they had to work out how to survive. What did they have? And it's a 100-year-old bank owned by the customers. And they went back to first principles. Why are we here? What's our unfair advantage? We are here to help the people of Finland get through difficult life transitions, buy their first tractor for the farm 100 years ago, buy their first mortgage. Where is the market failing? Or how about keep them healthy? So the bank builds 5 hospitals and operates on people. So the bank performing surgery, super efficient new hospitals, but because they start from scratch, they get rid of a lot of the inefficiencies. They create a health insurance product next to it, which, because the hospitals are super efficient, is quite low cost, becomes the fastest growing health insurance business in the Nordics. It's weird that a bank is repairing people's broken limbs, but it's finding something that is true to their purpose that the market is not doing. So one of the other things I noticed in a lot of the companies that were really innovating was they didn't make decisions at the top. They allowed everybody as much freedom as possible to make decisions. This is the head of the most successful games company in Europe, Supercell, Ilkka Paananen. You've played his games. He talks about wanting to be the world's least powerful CEO. He wants to hire amazing people and then just let them work. let them do their thing. The teams decide when they kill a project. They don't need his permission. But it works, because it's all about talent. This guy had a talent. His name was Eric Yuan. He came from China, tried about 18 times to get a visa to work in the States, finally got a visa, got a job at an early web conferencing company called WebEx, and notoriously bad software. Calls kept cutting off, lagging. Eric and his team were embarrassed by the customer feedback. They kept going to the bosses, say, could we just have a bit of investment to make it better? Sorry, not a corporate priority. WebEx is then bought by Cisco. He thinks we'll have some more money. Could we have an investment? Sorry, not a corporate priority. Frustrated, he and his team leave and build another business which becomes Zoom, which about 2 years ago almost overtook the market cap of Cisco because they were motivated. One other thing I'd noticed is find ways for smart people who think differently to run into each other. At Google X, the moonshot part of Google, where they come up with all sorts of crazy businesses, they're obsessed with what they call cognitive diversity. They won't have a team just with engineers and designers and science people. They also have to put in, the origami expert, the former concert pianist, because coming from different cognitive mindsets, they challenge each other. And you need to find ways for different types of thinking to come together, even if it means the design of your workplace. So these are the Nobel Prize winners for medicine for coming up with the mRNA vaccine. They met in a line for the photocopier at the University of Pennsylvania. They wouldn't have otherwise met, and they started talking about their research. So can you find ways to bring different types of people together for random, spontaneous, serendipitous conversation? This is the biggest biomedical research center in Europe, in London, next to St. Pancras, called the Crick Institute, trying to solve cancer and genomic illness. They've designed it with no walls on the inside, because it's not going to be the lone scientist shouting eureka in a lab. It's going to be the bioinformatics expert having a conversation with the data scientist, bringing in the genomics expert. That's how you're going to solve cancer. I'll just give you a couple more quick ones, and then I'm happy to take lots of questions. How does a software company that made it 30, 40 years ago with design software that you buy in a box, how do they survive in an era where you don't buy software, you subscribe to it, where you don't buy it in a box, where it's streamed? So Autodesk have stayed relevant by having a chunk of their revenue for play. They've invested in things like a pier in San Francisco full of 3D printers and robots and artists on paid fellowships, and anybody can come from the company and play. And so it's having revenue spent, but with no pressure to bring in revenue, to look for your blind spots. They keep experimenting. One thing they were doing is, what if we get, this is 8 or 9 years ago, AI working with designers to provide alternatives as they're building? They called it generative design. This is years before we were talking about generative AI. They worked out it changes the experience. It's now in all sorts of products as a massive moat. It's a $1 billion moat. And I guess the last couple of thoughts, you won't do this yourself. Build an ecosystem. This is Lei Jun of Xiaomi, one of the most successful handset companies in China. They make no margin on the handsets. Instead, they've built an ecosystem, as they call it, investing in hundreds of accessory startups. The best-selling air purifier in China, made by a startup, but with their brand on. The best-selling battery pack in China, made by a startup, but with their brand on. They make no money from the handsets, but a nice share of the revenue. But also it gets the customers coming back. It's what they call their ecosystem approach. It's differentiated them. We put him on the cover of Wired saying it's time to copy China. So I'm going to leave you with this idea of culture as the key determinant, not so much about tech, of who's going to win the next round of innovation. Don't just talk to people who talk about the stuff you talk about. Go to that crypto event, go to that human rights event, because tech is everywhere. It's just how we choose to apply it. You're not going to stop a tech, even if you invent it. Stephen Sasson invented the digital camera in 1975. Unfortunately, his employer, called Kodak, tried to suppress it because it wasn't convenient to their business model. It doesn't work like that, and we all know what happens if you get too comfortable. I think I'll leave you with, in an era where we're worrying about what happens to the human as the AI expands, one of the problems with being a human is we're biased. We're scared of change. That time you are in the completely autonomous car for the first time, it's going to be a bit, uncomfortable.
Oh, there's cars coming! Oh, there's cars! Bill, just put me back for me control it. Oh,
But
Jesus.
in a couple of weeks,
never-
it's just going to be another way for her to go and play bridge with her friends. Thank you for listening.